Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to review BingChat, right? BingChat is the search engine that has AI built into it through Microsoft and OpenAI. It has access to basically GPT-4. Okay, so let me share my screen. And I guess you might be wondering, well, why should we why should we look into using BingChat in relationship to academic research? The reason is because BingChat has access to GPT-4, which is the more powerful version of this large language model, this generative AI, that is able to better research and better produce answers for your queries, right? Basically because GPT-4 is more powerful than GPT-3 or 3.5. And most of all, BingChat is connected to the internet, whereas ChatGPT through OpenAI is not connected to the internet, as everyone knows, right? The information that ChatGPT has is limited to 2021. And so in that sense, if you can have a generative AI large language model search engine connected to the internet, then that, of course, would be very, very useful and very powerful. Okay, so here we have a BingChat. Well, actually, let's just go here. So this is BingChat. If you, I'm using this through the Edge browser, the Microsoft Edge browser. And so, but I think this would be the same menu you would have if you brought up the Bing search engine interface through Chrome or through Firefox or whatever, or Safari, whatever browser you're using. It should show up the same. So you could right away, the way it's displayed here, you can begin asking it a question right here. However, what I want us to do is look over here first, because if you click on the chat button here, this will open up a more detailed menu and more, if you will, choices. It allows you to converse with BingChat in either a more creative, a more balanced, or more precise way. For this purpose, for the purpose of demonstrating whether BingChat can access URLs, access websites, I'm just going to select the middle one. I'm going to select the one that's more precise. You'll actually see when you click here, more creative, more balanced, or more precise, you'll see that down here in the window where you type in your prompt. It says it's 0 out of 4,000 characters. If you select balanced, it's actually 0 out of 2,000, and then more precise, it allows you 0 out of 4,000. So in other words, for some reason, the way in which Microsoft has balanced these features is that it allows creative and more precise to have more characters than in more balanced. I don't know why they chose that, but that's the case. So I'm selecting more precise. You could select also more creative. That allows you to have, if you will, larger prompts, more text, more questions, and, if you will, longer responses as well. You can also access BingChat through this button all the way on the top left, on the top right. But we won't use that for today. That's this, if you will, side window that opens up. It's almost like a, if you will, co-pilot that opens up that can refer contextually to what's happening over here in the main page. But we are going to close that. We're not going to use that sidebar, side browser feature for this demonstration. We're going to stick to the main BingChat interface. Okay, so what can it do, right? I've also, if you look up here, I've got a bunch of tabs open already, which I've already kind of pre-populated. And so, for example, if I was an academic researcher, I might want to look at newspapers, right? That's very low-hanging fruit. Here, I've preloaded an article through the Globe and Mail, which is a very well-known Canadian news outlet, media and news outlet. I've searched for a story called Ontario Rejects Recommendations to Label Intimate Partner Violence an Epidemic. published June 28th, 2023. So I'm going to copy that URL, copy, and then I'm going to just paste it in here into Bing, and I'm going to ask Bing to summarize. So let's see what it does. So I'm asking it to do already something which is very common for, I think, researchers, or if you will, students, or in general, academic users want, which is to use the generative AI to summarize things, or to help you learn something, or for it to teach you something. So there you go. It clearly can access this article over here, and this tab that was here. So it's not a very long article. I've already pre-read it, and let's see, the article show the government. Yeah, so that's fair, I think. We're not today. We're not going to judge it on whether the summarization is of a high quality or not. I'm just showing you whether it's able to read it correctly and able to follow your prompt, right? We could have also have written something like, you are academic researcher. Please summarize and explain the key arguments found in this article, right? So I'll paste it in again. So it's doing the same thing. It probably will write something very similar, but you can, as we know, through prompt engineering, create, if you will, stronger responses that follow a particular voice that you want the machine to take on, right? So I told it to be an academic researcher. You can also see here that it's quoting as well. It's citing, right? It's citing actually the Globe and Mail article. And I'll wait a second while it finishes writing this. And then I will click on the link to show that to test whether or not the link is correct. Here you can see in BingChat, it's saying in this conversation that we're having with it, in this session, it allows us to have 30 questions. We've now asked it 2 questions, or asked it to do 2 things. And then let's click on that first citation. Yeah, so it takes us to the article. So that's very good. So I think that's accurate in the sense that it's citing correctly. It's not making up the URL. It's not making up information about this particular article, which it has read for us. We could have also asked it to do many other things, but again, it's not testing whether it can do those things. This is really a test of whether BingChat can access, if you will, URLs. Okay, second. Let's see that now. This is a fairly short article about intimate partner violence in the Canadian context. I've also now looked up something that is maybe a bit longer and more of an editorial. Here is an article written for the conversation about the true cost of food. So that's a very common topical issue. And then I'll go back to Bing. Can it access this website? Summarize, and then I'll paste that in and see if it can access that article. It's saying it's searching for that URL. So that's a good sign. It's actually telling you that it's going to that proper URL. Yes, and then it starts to, yeah. The article, in fact, does talk about the price of food and the production, processing, and distribution issues, which contribute to the true cost of food. So okay, so that's fine. So it can certainly access this URL. Can it access perhaps a document that's a bit longer? Here's a older article from a few years ago in the Tampa Bay Times, in the American context in Florida. It's an article that I've used in some of my teaching about how AI, this is pre-generative AI, pre-large language model, but about how AI could be used by police or by a sheriff department to basically identify, if you will, specific possible future criminals based on previous or prior interaction with the police. So this is a much longer investigative article, right? So you can see it's many, many pages long. much more information. So the first article we looked at was in the Globe and Mail, which is a news article. It was able to deal with that URL, no problem. We asked it to deal with an editorial from the Conversation, which is a bit longer. It had no problems with that. Here is a much longer article. Will it also have the same positive results? Let's see. Okay, so you can see that it's actually searching for the right URL, so that's a good sign. So again, it is going into the internet. It's access to the internet as a AI-enabled search engine, and it's found the right URL, and now it's summarizing that article. So good. So I think again, I know this because I pre-tested this before it turned on this video, so I do know that it's able to do that. What about if, let's say, and of course the citations are also correct. I'm not going to bother clicking on them. I know they're correct. What about if we looked at more academic-y types of writing? So here is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Can it access this? This is a much longer, if you will, academic tome, many pages long, quite long. And it's very simple. The URL is very simple, right? It's just Plato, Stanford, edu, entries, Socrates. So let's see if it can read that. All right, summarize. And let's see if it knows to access that URL. Because I think one of the criticisms of GPT is it confabulates or it makes up things. Sometimes people like to use the term hallucinate. In this case, again, there you go, a success. You can see that it searched for the right URL, which I pasted into the prompt. And it is indeed, of course, summarizing the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Socrates. Again, we could ask it many questions about that entry, about this entry in particular, but I'm not going to spend much time on it. It's really just proof of concept whether it's able to do that. So it does do that. It talks a little bit about Socrates, his life, so on and so forth, when he was born. Okay, so that's great. It can read, if you will, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Can it read now something that's a government document? Here's a Government of Canada document through the Department of Justice. And yes, it certainly would be able to read this. I'm not going to test this. This would be very easy. But in this document about justice and about restorative justice in particular, it has this reference to a guideline for restorative justice regarding criminal matters. So let's select that. And let's see. This is a much longer document that has, if you will, much more specific and detailed recommendations and guidelines for restorative justice. So if you were doing research in the area of, say, criminology or criminal justice, maybe you might be looking for something like this. Let's copy that. We'll go back to the Bing browser and we go summarize. Let's hope it's able to read this document. Okay, so that's a very good sign. It's searching for the correct URL that I had pasted in, and it tells us the correct name of it. It's the correct date. It's saying it comes out of this federal, provincial, territorial meeting, which is correct. It talks a little bit about this RJ restorative justice kind of framework. It talks about the different, if you will, historical traditions that underpin RJ. Yes, this is very good. So again, not a test of whether this is a good summarization, but really just a test whether it's able to access URLs, right? Which again, I think is very powerful and would be very useful for academic research for both students and researchers alike. Can it access another, if you will, research site that would be very useful in law or in criminology research, which is the Canadian Legal Information Institute, which is a nonprofit organization. Can it access not just the page, but let's look at, I had preloaded something here. Yeah. Is it able to access this document about detention and arrest, which is quite detailed and quite complex and very useful if indeed you were a researcher in the area of, say, detention and arrest and its relationship to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So let's copy that URL. We'll paste it in here. We'll say summarize. And you can see that this URL is quite a bit longer in the sense of its the characters or the digits that it has. But it's able to understand that, it's reproduced that. I think perfectly. I'm looking at the last few figures. It's now looking actually beyond that. It's looking back at the original document, and it says, here we go. I'm sorry, but I couldn't find any information about the specific document you mentioned. The link provides leads to a page on CanLE, which is a nonprofit organization, blah, blah, blah. This website provides access to court judgments, tribunal decisions, so on and so forth. Is there anything else? I can say try again. I'm pretty sure it struggles, basically, I understand, with nested pages, I think, right? So you can see here in CanLE, I'll just come back to here. These are nested pages that are, if you will, hyperlinked to different, if you will, sections on the page. And Bing struggles with that. It's not able to read this, right? It's not able to read this. So that's a disappointment, I think, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't find information. And it's still saying the same thing. Okay, so we know that BingChat can access URLs. It can search for things, read things, return information from the internet. But some documents it struggles with, such as documents that have, if you will, a nested table of contents. So it doesn't like that. Of course, some of you are thinking, well, why don't you just go back into that document, copy, paste it, and ask it to do that? Yes, you can do that. And in fact, in a separate video, I will show how you can also use the right browser window to contextually query what's in the browser, but that's for a different video. Right now, I'm just focusing on whether it can access, whether BingChat has the ability to access websites. And so far, I think it's able to access news sites. It's able to access, if you will, editorial sites. It's able to access American newspapers. It's able to access encyclopedias. It can access, in fact, also different guidelines that the government has for restorative justice. So it can access, if you will, federal, provincial, and kind of municipal political documents. But it struggles with this one, which is the Legal Institute, Canadian Legal Institute, because it has these nested pages. Can it access the repository called Archive, is spelled ARXIV, Archive, which is hosted by Cornell University, where many scientific papers that are not peer-reviewed, they're pre-published, but where many scientific papers are hosted. Could it read something like that? Could it read something like this paper exploring the solar poles, the last great frontier of the sun? And what I'll do is, here it has an abstract, but it doesn't have the actual article here. To access the article through Archive, which is hosted by Cornell University, you have to click on the PDF, which is right here. I'll click on that. So there is an article which I've just randomly picked about, I have no expertise in solar flares or solar plasma, but here it is. So I'll copy that PDF, that address, I'll paste it into Bing here. I'll write summarize. So that's good. It's actually found the PDF. It's actually searched for the correct URL. And that's great. I'm not going to belabor it, but you could ask it many questions about it. I know that it's able to successfully read a PDF hosted on archive. So that's really good because there are many, there would be many articles, scientific and social science and humanities and arts research, which would be PDFs that are hosted on the web, which would be great for us to use BingChat to interact with and to ask it to help us read or break down or to summarize or to outline, so on and so forth. Many tasks that we could give GPT-4 through BingChat. Could it read a Google book? Okay, so here I've found a Google book called A Primer on Postmodernism. Here's the Google book link. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that into Bing. I didn't even write summarize, but you can also just paste in the URL and it'll see if it can read or access that. So that's good. It looks like that is the correct URL that that is associated with that page, but it says, listen, I can't. It leads me to Google Books, something that it's scanned, but I couldn't find any information. So that's strange. It found the link. It knows it's connected to Google Books. It knows this basically, but it is unable to read the document that's associated with this URL. Okay, so it struggles with that. Okay, sorry about that. I got a bit pulled away. I'm back now. Yeah, so this book called A Primer on Postmodernism is something that Bing could not find, right? Let's try again. Actually, let's sweep. In other words, we get rid of these previous queries, because sometimes it is true that within a chat that it could confuse, if you will, the AI if you don't start with a new topic. So let's sweep that all away. We'll stay with more precise. Let's go back to summarize, and then I think it's that Google Books. This book called A Primer on Postmodernism. Again, yeah, it can't, right? It's saying, now it's even saying it's worse. It's not only, it saying it can't access it. He knew it was Google Books before, but now it's saying, oh, it's behind the paywall, which is untrue. So there is some aspects of confabulation here, I think, where it's making up an answer, even though we did select more precise, which should actually diminish or reduce confabulation. So it has a problem with reading Google Books. Okay, so let's try something else. So I also went and Googled or searched for another document. This is a document that actually is hosted on a university website. It's actually the entire scanned book, which is hosted on this university website for the anti-aesthetic, edited by Hal Foster. So I'll copy that URL and I'll say summarize that. Let's see what happens with that. Again, it says it can't do that because it's behind a paywall, which is untrue. Let's ask it to retry. That's a bit of typo, but let's see if it knows whether it can do that. We could also start it again. Yeah, still can't summarize. Let's sweep again. Let's say more creative. Let's go summarize this anti-aesthetic. So here you go. Here's a perfect illustration of how sometimes, even if the machine tells you it cannot access that document, there's no way it can. It's behind the paywall. It's something I can't see. If you try it again and maybe switch up some of the different, if you will, options, I went from more precise to now more creative. It actually was able to go back to this URL that I pasted in. It found the anti-aesthetic, and I think it has done well in terms of the summary. Can you present a bulleted list of key issues discussed in this text? And then just for good measure, I'll repaste it in. Sure. So the key issues would be relationship between modernism and postmodernism. Absolutely. Impact of communication information technologies. Absolutely. Critique of universalism. Yes. The expansion of the field of sculpture. I think that's the Rosalind Krauss article. Yes. Critique of the museum. Yes. So on and so forth. Yes. All of this is correct. So it began by saying it couldn't read this. I re-rolled. I actually reselected more creative, and it was able to comment on this. Now the question does arise: is it reading this primer? Sorry, is it reading this primer? Sorry, is it reading this text edited by Hal Foster, or is it through its pre-training? You know, before the 2021, it is pre-training in its absorption of the Common Crawl, which was what it was trained on the 3 billion the texts or whatever, however many data points it was exposed to. Could it have been exposed to this at that time? So is it reading this, or is it reading this specific URL, or is it reading perhaps is it referring back to something that it was already previously trained on? That's unclear, right? Here, it does say it's looking at this, and it does say here's a summary of the PDF document. But we also know that it makes things up. So it's I'm not confident that all of this is just a specific reading of that PDF. It could be partially a reading of that PDF, but also could be, if you will, getting some of that information from its previous training. Okay, so we'll leave Hal Foster's The Anti-Aesthetic, and let's move on to another document that is available through search. If you Googled, if you use Google Scholar, you'd be able to find this article that I found. What was postmodernism? It's not a specifically outstanding article, but it was something that I found on Google Scholar. So let's again summarize. I'm sorry, summarize that article. So what was postmodernism? So it could read that. So it can read this. Is it by Bruce Mahale though? It's saying it's read that. What was postmodernism is written by John Frau. This is saying it's written by Brian McHale, which is incorrect. So again, I think this points to the issue of confabulation and error in general. This is incorrect. The essay that I pasted in is this article called "What Was Postmodernism?" And here it's given me something that's completely different. It is authoritatively stating that this article is written by McHale, and it's talking about, I think quite, if you will, with a certain amount of authority, that it is about postmodernity or postmodernism, but it's not the right author. So let's go back and is it confused because this is part of a longer conversation and that because we clicked on creative? Let's go new topic. Let's go back to more precise and let's say summarize again, and then we'll paste that in. Will it be different this time? I don't know. Let's see. Now it says it's not able to summarize that PDF, right? But that it could look for other things. Let's tell it to retry it. Yeah, he's still unable to. So that's interesting. When confronted with this article, which is available as a PDF through the internet, you can Google it through Google or Google Scholar. When you paste in this PDF and in BingChat, you've selected more creative, it actually tries to make up something that it doesn't actually see to please you, right? Because you have selected more creative. But if you select something if you select the feature more precise, then it tells you, I'm sorry, I can't summarize that. So that calls into question, I think, the efficacy and the usefulness of BingChat for research, because you will always have a certain amount of doubt, I think, when using BingChat, which is GPT-4. So in terms of it being a large language model, it's very capable, and it's sentence structure, its syntax, it's very fluid, it's very natural language, but it is also making things up, right? Okay, so I won't beat a dead horse. Okay, and then here, if we click here is Google Scholar, and I searched postmodernism earlier. And here, let's see, here's an article by Ihab Hassan, a famous author who has written much about postmodernity and postmodernism. And then here is an article that's hosted on the Sydney, University of Sydney website. So let's right click that, and then I'm going to copy that link. So because if I clicked on that, it would just open up as a PDF. So I don't want to do that. I mean, I can do that. This is what will happen. It downloads it. So I don't want it to do that. Can it read hosted PDFs? So again, I will write summarize, and then I will paste in that open journal through the Sydney University Library. Hit enter. And again, it says it cannot find that, right? It's not able to read that. So that is unfortunate, because you can clearly read it yourself. And in a different video, I'll probably show you how you can, of course, paste in or read that PDF in your browser and then open up the sidebar of BingChat, which is over here. And you can use the features here to contextually read the text on the left of this sidebar, but we won't do that in this video. And then just again, I guess for being, if you will, comprehensive, here's a long text which is hosted as basically an e-commons document through the Loyola University in Chicago, and it's Virginia Woolf's book. It's a title called Virginia Woolf and Postmodernism by Pamela Coggy. So it's quite a long book. So this is why I'm interested in doing this, because can it read a very, very long text, right? Is it possible for it to read a very long text, hundreds of pages long, which is now hosted at a university website, which is freely available through the Loyola University e-commons. Okay, so let's sweep that away. Let's stick with more precise. Let's go summarize. And I'll paste that in. And let's see what it says. Again, sorry, I can't do that. I can't find it. Okay, please retry. They will do that. It's not. Okay, let's go back to new topic. Let's go to more balance, and then let's just paste in the URL and see if it can read that. Ah, so that's interesting. Again, I pasted in this document, which is a document about Virginia Woolf and postmodernity or postmodernism. But it tells me in more balanced response that it's actually a research paper about Roland Barthes by Michael Riffater, which it is not. So it really does call into question what is going on here. It cannot read this document, even though you and I, as if you will, human users, can certainly read this document, right? That there's not a problem in that sense, right? There's not a problem in reading this document, right? And if I'm not mistaken, you can also copy paste, right? You can also select text and copy. So it is a scanned document, but it is certainly readable. BingChat is able to read other documents, but not this specific document. Okay, and then lastly, let's go to something that I've used as an example before for testing, which is a document that I'm, if you will, a contributor to. It's an open text, an open educational resource, which is edited by my colleagues Dan Led and Shireen Hassan. And they have edited a book basically called Introduction to Criminology. And one of the chapters is Race and Crime, which I'm the author of. And let's just say we pick the second section, colonialism, and which is not very long, colonialism and criminal justice. So this is an open education resource. Anyone in the world, if they have the link or if they search for it through Google or through Bing, would be able to arrive at this URL. So let's copy and then paste that into Bing and see if it can read that. So it wasn't able to read that Virginia Woolf e-document hosted by Loyola University, but it is able to read this document, which is hosted by Kwantlen Polytechnic University as an e-document through through Pressbook publication framework. So it's yes, please. It's asking me what I want. Saying please. Tell me more about the main argument. What is interesting though here, you will see that although it's saying it's able to read it and that it's from a chapter called Colonialism and Criminal Justice, it is not by Alison Burke, David Cotter, Brian Federick, Tiffany Morey, and Laurie Rutz-Burry. That's a complete confabulation, right? I am the author, right? So it hasn't named me. So this is the chapter, or this is the section of the longer chapter. But this is what's interesting. The citation is wrong, but this, if you will, very small summary. The chapter argues that colonialism has had a significant impact on the criminal justice system and how they operate. Can't be ignored. There's a relationship. It also discusses colonialism and crime and punishment. It's influenced the development of the criminal justice institutions and practices, so on and so forth. That's all true. So in some respects, the reading of the text is not bad, it's correct, but the citation of who is the author is completely incorrect because it is not these 1, 2, 3, 4, these 5 authors. This chapter is written by me, by a single author. So again, it shows how it's a real mixed bag, I think, in terms of its ability to read URLs and whether and how that ability to read URLs, I'll stop sharing. Its ability to read those URLs are efficacious or useful for university application or research or academic research. So in conclusion, I would have to say that, you know, I think I've shown in this brief video that BingChat, number one, can access the internet. Absolutely. So that's a plus. That's something that ChatGPT cannot do. It can also access it through the model of GPT-4, which is the more powerful large language model framework. So that's good. You're going to get better, more robust results in terms of its writing. But it has problems, as we saw, in reading. It didn't have problems in accessing that newspaper story that I showed earlier. That newspaper story from the Tampa Bay Times in Florida didn't have a problem accessing that. It didn't have problems accessing the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It did not have problems accessing that Department of Justice document that about restorative justice, but then it did struggle a lot with that the Canadian the CanLII website and the document about detention. It could not read that, and I think it was somehow related to the nested, if you will, chapters. It also had difficulty, if I recall. No, it didn't have difficulty with the archive, that article about plasma, right, in the scientific literature, which was also, when you clicked on it, had to reopen as a separate PDF. So for some reason, it did not struggle with that PDF. It was able to read that scientific article about solar flares and plasma. And I think it was useful when I think if I recall, I restarted the search. The primer on postmodernism, I think the citation was wrong. If I recall, it attributed to the wrong person, but the information I think was correct. The Hal Foster document, it was able to read that the document which was hosted on Loyola University website. It could read that document. And as far as I could see, its understanding of that document was fairly accurate. It would depend. The mileage, I guess, that you and I would get would vary depending on the types of queries or questions that we posed. But that article called Beyond Postmodernism, when I right-clicked it in Google Scholar and I copy and I pasted into BingChat, it was not able to read that. It couldn't read the Virginia Woolf book. And it did read the chapter or the section of the chapter that I wrote for the Kwantlen Polytechnic University hosted open education resource, but it also got the author wrong because the author is me, but for some reason it cited Burke, Carter, Frederick, Morey, and Rutsbury, who I don't know. I don't even know where it got these names for. So as we know, GPT is famous for confabulation or making things up, and it hasn't disappointed us here. Okay, so there you have it. It's a very mixed bag. I do think ChatGPT. I do think BingChat as a, if you will, interface to GPT-4 is powerful, but it stumbles when trying to access certain URLs. So certain URLs like newspapers, like university websites are fine. Some PDFs are fine, and in others, it really struggles to read. And then others, it not only struggles to read, but it also tries to also make up information. So I think it's a very frustrating use. It seems to be very powerful. You probably wouldn't want to use it alone as a research tool. It might be one tool in your tool chest. You might use it in concert with something like FileGPT or ChatDoc or ChatPDF or Humata, these other interfaces that allow you to search a specific uploaded PDF. So that could be another way around a solution, which I'll make a separate video about. That could be another solution to getting around its inability to read certain PDFs. You might just copy that PDF and then upload or download that PDF and then upload it to something like ChatDoc or Shari AI or Read My PDF, all of those different interfaces for specific documents. So that could be a solution. But again, many of those would be GPT 3.5. So the language model is not as sophisticated as the language model found in BingChat. So you have, you know, there's something that you do have to, if you will, weigh, or you know, that you'd have to consider, you know, on your own case-by-case use basis. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. And probably the next video that I'll try and post will be about how to use that sidebar in BingChat to read documents contextually in the browser that it's unable to read when just using the chat feature through the main portal. Okay, I hope you got something out of that, and see you next time.